Good morning, students. We learnt about motivation, we learnt about emotions, and today we are going to look at another aspect of cognitive psychology, perception. We talk about perceived, perception, perceptions in life, perspectives. So, what is this? What does this mean? Perception. To be aware of something, to attach meaning to something that we see. Perception is being aware of something that we see or sense or feel or hear or see. We see so many things, we hear so many things, we taste so many things, we sense a lot of feelings in our body. Now, for example, if we eat particular food, we are able to say what it tastes like. If we can say what food it is, if we can say it tastes sweet or it is very hot, it is spicy, then we can say that we have not only tasted but we have found out what it tastes like. That is perception. Okay, so we'll learn in detail about perception. Sensation and perception. Sensation. This is a process through which the senses pick up visual, auditory, and other sensory stimuli and transmit them to the brain. So, sensory information that is registered in the brain but has not been interpreted is called sensation. That is, you have eaten something but you still haven't been able to say whether it is spicy or sweet, whether it's hot or cold. You've just eaten. So sensations of taste has taken something but still you haven't been able to say what you have eaten or how it tastes like till your brain has registered, and then when that sensation of taste has interpreted what you've eaten as spicy, that is called, then it becomes perception. So till then your taste stays at sensation level, that is, you've just eaten something. You have smelt something, that is at the level of sensation. You will say, I'm smelling something, but only when you're able to say what you're smelling, then perception has taken place. So, can you differentiate between sensation and perception? Perception is a process by which sensory information is actively organized and interpreted by the brain. The process of selecting, organizing, and interpreting new sensory data into useful mental representations of the world. Sensation is like you're typing the word TABLE. So only the words. Then the brain registers, and then you understand, put all the letters together, and you're perceiving the letters together as table. Same way, you suddenly hear some noise and you're not able to immediately say where it's coming from and what noise it is. So that is where you're at the level of sensation. The minute you're able to say, oh, it is a calling bell, oh, it's a cat crying, then your brain has registered what you have heard and has organized the data of sound, and it's able to say it is a cat's noise, the cat is mewing, or there is a bell ringing. So that is when perception takes place. Same with all the other sensory stimuli, whether it is sound or a visual picture, or it is a pain stimuli, or it is a taste. It's all about starting with the sensation level, brain registering, and organizing the data and then interpreting it comes to the stage of perception. I hope you understand what is perception. To be aware of what your senses have picked up, that is perception. How sensation occurs, the first level. Eyes, ears, skin, nose and tongue and certain contain receptor cells. These receptor cells receive and process sensory information from the environment. So that's when you start hearing something, smelling something, when the stimuli from the environment reaches you. So how does sensation lead to perception? Something called transduction happens. Sensory receptors like eyes, ears, nose, skin, tongue convert the stimulus into neural impulses which are sent to the brain. So you can see the information of a light or sound, and then there is a sensation, a raw data. Then it's sent to the brain and the brain interprets it as whatever the stimuli is. It's perceptual processes. So as we said, first it is the sensation, then only the perceptual process starts happening. Perception or perceptual processes would include selection, organization and interpretation. Selection refers to choosing which of the many stimuli that will be processed. When you are in an environment, several stimuli are thrown at you from the environment. It's not all the stimuli that are picked up. Maybe just one stimulus that's picked up, or maybe two or three. So again, there is a selection process in the perceptual process. Second thing is organization. This involves collecting the information into some pattern. And the third is interpretation. It involves understanding the pattern. So it's all the three stages happen when, from level of sensation, the brain starts interpreting the perception or what you see or hear or taste. So there is a selection of stimuli from the environment. The stimuli is organized in a way that interpretation can be made by the brain. So what are the factors in perception? There are a group of factors, one which affects or influences perception. One is the objective factors, two is the subjective factors. What are these objective factors? There are a number of characteristics of stimuli that influence our perception. These are objective. One is the intensity of the stimuli. When a noise is very loud, your perception is easier. Whereas the noise level is less intense, you can miss out the stimuli itself. Again, size. The bigger the size, you tend to attend to it better. And distinct and striking. Anything that's very, very striking or a contrast from the normal can attract the perception process. Movement, anything that moves tends to attract or tends to invite attention than anything that's stationary. Novelty, anything that's new attracts attention and then leads to perception. Even at the sensation level, these objective factors matter. Duration, longer a stimuli is present, better the sensation picks it up, the sensory stimuli picks it up and processes it into perception. So duration matters. And repetition, when something is constantly repeated again and again and again, it tends to invite attention, tends to attract and leads to perception. For example, in an advertisement, when you repeatedly see a product being advertised, every commercial break, the same product is shown, then you tend to perceive it strongly and it gets registered and you're more attentive, and you perceive it as the best product sometimes, or you want to buy it. Abrupt change, and any sudden change again makes perception possible, because immediately you're attracted to the stimuli because there is a sudden change. So when you look at objective factors, these are the ones which can affect your perception. The stimuli should be intense. Stimuli size, depending on the size, it's big. A big truck will attract your attention than a regular two-wheeler or a small car. A striking one like a lightning suddenly tends to attract. A stimuli like lightning, you can't miss out. Anything that's moving very fast will be a stimuli that will take your attention. Anything that's new, anything that's present for a long time, repetition, not very long time, but for a considerable time it stays, and then you tend to perceive it. You won't miss that stimuli. For example, if a mosquito just bites for a second, you may miss it out. But if a mosquito is constantly biting you, duration is longer, then you definitely want to hit that mosquito because it is affecting you. Repetition of something again and again, when it happens, it does become a strong stimuli that perception takes place. And anything that there is a sudden change that happens can also be a strong objective factor to influence us, an objective stimuli to influence our perception. So if a perception has to take place, the stimuli need to have certain factors like what we just saw. Coming to factors in detail, as I said, intensity, I said the louder a sound, the more likely the stimuli is perceived by you. The brighter a light, you will focus your perception on. Size, again, for example, in magazines, a full page advertisement is more likely to be noticed than a small advertisement. You see in a Hindu paper, first page will be full of an advertisement which will definitely attract a stimuli which is very strong. It may be about a jewelry shop, it may be about a mobile, but when it's covering the whole page, you cannot miss it. And distinct and striking, things that are perceived sooner than dull and unclear things, like bright colored fabric will attract you. Anything that's dull, a music which is loud will attract, whereas a very soft music will not be so attractive as a stimuli. Movement, as I said, when things move suddenly in a very quiet environment, it's quickly perceived. Birds sitting quietly on a tree are not quickly perceived as compared to ones about to fly. You will notice a flying bird than a bird that is sitting on a tree. And novelty, as I said again, anything new is perceived quickly than anything old and which you keep seeing every day. Duration. Television and radio advertisements of long duration are attended to more keenly than those of short and quick duration. There are some advertisements which comes just for a second, whereas there are some which come for a few seconds, which will keep you focused on it. Repetition causes us to adapt to the repeated stimuli, anything that keeps on coming, like an advertisement that comes after every episode of a serial or commercial break. Any sudden abrupt change, again, can sudden noise, as music that's going on a normal volume, suddenly when the volume is increased, it attracts your attention. So these are the objective factors in perception. I hope you all understand what and how perception is. What you see, what you become aware of is influenced by these objective factors in the stimuli. Then we look at the group of subjective factors. Sometimes perception is determined not only by the physical characteristics of the stimuli, which we saw. The one objective factors are all the characteristics of the stimuli or stimulus that we are exposed to. But perception is also influenced by the characteristics of the person who is perceiving it. The perceiver, or the one who looks at the stimuli, who receives the stimuli, his or her own characteristics will also affect or influence the way perception can take place. We look at what are the personal characteristics of the perceiver. I hope you understand. The earliest objective factors are the characteristics of the stimuli or the stimulus that we pick up from the environment. And now it is the subjective factors, that is the one who sees or hears the stimuli based on his or her characteristics. The stimuli can be differently perceived. So what are these subjective factors or person's factors? One is motives or needs. For example, we will look at it. For example, if somebody is hungry, even a small, any unattractive food will be very tasty. The person will want it immediately. But a person who is quite full and not hungry at all, the food which is usually not attractive will not attract this person unless he is really hungry. So motives or needs of the person will determine the perception of the person and how he receives the stimuli. Second is the interests and values. Whatever the person's value will determine what attracts. If there is an advertisement of jewelry, if the person has no interest in gold or jewels, that advertisement will be of no value, will not attract his or her attention. And again, past experience is a very strong subjective factor which can influence your perception. Any stimuli that comes to you, you always judge it on the basis of your past experience on that stimuli. You would have had an experience with that stimuli earlier, and so when it comes again to you, you will always base your perception on the past experience. Age, again, your age matters how you look at your stimuli, younger or older or middle-aged. Preparatory set, how you're mentally prepared also can affect your perception. And social cultural factors have a strong influence in the way you perceive things. We'll come to it in detail. Now we said subjective factors, motives. When people are motivated, they tend to see and hear what they want to hear. In other words, we may be set to perceive the world in ways that agree with our motives and match our goals. So when you're hungry, you will only be looking for places of eateries where there is food available. Same way, when your need is you're looking for a rented house, you will be focused only on looking at boards, house for rent. Then you will not look at shops. So based on your motive or need, the stimuli perception differs. I hope you understand this. Whatever your need, whatever your motive, that determines the way you perceive stimuli in your environment. Interests and values. We attend to those aspects of world that relate to our interest. Even what you watch on TV. There are so many channels on TV. But the type of channel that you use depends on what your interests are. Suppose you're someone who likes cooking, you will go into a cookery channel. Whereas if you're interested in politics, you will go into a channel which will have debates on the present political conditions. So your perception depends on your interests and values. Then the past experience, as I said, much of our daily activity is dependent on our past experience. We have learned to react to cues and symbols. Example, on seeing a moving line on the sky, we immediately think it is an aeroplane. We don't think of anything else because we have earlier have learned from past experience that when there is an aeroplane on the sky, it will leave a line on the sky. Then there are some kinds and types of perception. What are these types of perception? We perceive objects in different manners as compared to their position in the environment. Objects may be moving or static or stationary. When we have to perceive motion, we may have to locate sounds and voices in the space around us. So there are different types of perception. One is the form perception, then the size perception, then there is depth perception, there is perception of movement and time perception. Okay, we look at these types one by one. Form perception. Gestaltists is a group of psychologists. We looked at it in our first chapter. Proposed laws of organization that specify how people perceive form. One very popular theme for perception is the figure and ground theory, where basic organizations take place when we perceive things. Figure is perceived as distinct from the background. Figure and ground says that the way you look at a figure is based on the background where the figure is placed. Figure is closer to the viewer than the background. And reversible figures can also happen. Figure on ground can be switched based on the way the person perceives. Sometimes the background can be perceived, sometimes the figure can be perceived. We'll look at it. Can you see an example for figure ground perception? Now some of you straight away will notice a flower vase or a candle stand. And some of you will notice two faces facing each other. The background is blue and the figure is white in color. You can see the background as the figure or the figure as the background. So it depends on the way you perceive it. You can say the background can be blue and just two faces. The background is white and the figure is blue with two faces. Or you can say, actually, in a common sense point of view, the blue is the background and the figure is flower vase. But we tend to see two faces in the blue in the background. So this is called figure ground perception. And can you see how a perception varies? And that's because the background and the figure are two different colors. So what does Gestalt Principle say about it? Formation of a figure. There are some factors which would bring some order to perception. So here the figures are formed in such a way that it is in the shape of a flower vase, but at the same time it is also giving the shape of the sides are giving the shape of a face. So Gestalt says the formation of a figure also helps in the way we perceive. Then nearness. Stimuli that are near to each other tend to be grouped together. And similarity. Stimuli that are similar in size and shape, color or form tend to be here. The similarity of the colors make it look as if there are two faces. And the closeness. And continuation or continuity. Perception tends towards Simplicity and continuity, and closure refers to the tendency to complete a figure so that it has a consistent overall form. So Gestalt principle says figure needs to have certain factors to bring an order to perception. That is, it has to have a figure, form of a figure, and it has to be closer, proximity or nearness. It has to be similar, and it has to be continuous. So the continuity should be there. There should be a closer, a completeness about the figure. Now Gestalt's grouping principles area are at work here. Can you see how small shapes form into a house kind of pattern, a kennel. It may be triangles or different shapes, all put together form a completeness of a house. Separately, each of these pieces are looked at separately. It may be a square, it may be a rectangle, it may be a triangle, but put together it forms a completeness. Gestalts always believe that you have to look at anything as a whole. Again, Gestalt's principles of organizing perception. Can you see that in figure ground, the ground is always seen as farther than the figure. Here, the figure is the red ones, and the background is the cream one. And it looks the figure is closer to you and the ground is figure. That's the figure ground theory we saw earlier also, how the ground, figure ground, the background looks, it's far away than the figure. Coming to, we talked about proximity. Objects that are physically closer together are grouped together. Can you see? The objects that are closer are grouped together. The small objects that are closer are all grouped together. Can you see? This is about being closer. Then your perception also varies depending on how close they are to each other. You perceive differently. All the small ones are grouped together because they are closer to each other, and all the big ones are perceived as big because they are kept one after closer to each other. Suppose if you had kept one big one and one small one alternating, then you wouldn't have had a group of all small and group of all big. It would have been alternating one big, one small. Then it would have been difficult to perceive them as big or small. Because they are closer, all the small ones are closer to each other, we are able to perceive. So proximity or closeness or nearness helps in your perception, in grouping. Next is the continuity. Objects that continues a pattern are grouped together. Now, can you see the first pattern? When you see this, what do you see? You see a line, you see a curve, and you see another pattern here. You continuously, when you see this, you don't see the second one. When you see the first one, do you see this alone? No. Do you see this? No. Or this? Because it is all continuous. But actually, if you look at it, there is this pattern and this. There is another pattern, a curve. Then there is another design also. All three are in this. But because it is continuous, we are able to see it as one single pattern. Because they are continuous. Suppose you break them separately like this. Can you see? See, can you break it separately? You just see this pattern. So continuity helps in your perception. You can imagine daily life events or even objects where there is continuity, your perception is different. For example, there is a long queue. You will just see them as people, but you don't see them as not even gender. You may not see them as girls, boys, young, old. But if you separate them, there's no continuity. You will see old people as old people, or you will see people who are from another culture, or if they are separated out. But if they are continuously in a queue, you don't look at them as people from another village, or people from another community, or people from another gender, or people from another age. It's continuous, it's a queue. You just look at them as a queue of people. So continuity helps you, or influences your perception. You can make out from the way you look at the first design and the way you look at all the three in that first design. Another one is closure, the tendency to see a finished unit. This is again a Gestalt theory, where a triangle will be a triangle only if all the three pieces are brought closer. Till then, it's just a piece of thing. Now, when you bring them together, it forms a complete shape. Till then, it's not a complete shape, whether it's circle or a square. So, a closure in a form or figure is needed to perceive things in complete. Similarity, similar objects are grouped together. Can you see? Now you look at this, you will look at it as 5, and you can look at it as S, letter S also, because of similarity. Okay, so that's about organizing, how your mind or brain is organizing the stimuli and forming into a organized data that you can perceive this as what you perceive. So can you see the process that's happening in your brain? It's not just the stimuli. Stimuli comes to you, but it's your brain that absorbs it and then makes it perception to say this is a square, this is S, or this is 5. All that happens once your raw stimuli from the environment is processed, and then it turns into something called perception. I hope you understand. Now we talked about figure ground, and there are size perception. 3 types of constancy are explained briefly: size, shape, and color. When they are constant, that influences our perception. There is a constancy in the way the size and shape and color of objects are, and that influences our perception greatly. What is size constancy or perceptual constancy? Sorry, not constancy, it's constancy. Size constancy is the tendency to perceive objects in a consistent manner despite the changing sensations that are retrieved by our senses. Visual constancy plays an important role in helping us adapt to our environment successfully. Learning plays an important role in the development of constancy. Once we know that certain objects in our environment have certain characteristics, we tend to perceive them in the same way, regardless of the condition or conditions under which they are perceived. When we know that an object is of certain size, we tend to perceive it as being the same size regardless how far it is from our eyes. The size constancy, the perceiver has the ability to judge true or measured size regardless of the distance involved. For this, an example would be, you know how big a tree is, or what is the size, normal size of a tree is. So, when you see a tree on a hill, you know the tree looks small to your eyes, but the learning helps you to understand that the tree is really not as small as it looks or appears to you, but the tree is normal in its size. That's because your visual and your learning and all these, and your learning that which is consistent, that the tree size is always the same regardless of whether it's on a hill or it's seen from a distance. The tree is big. This is called size constancy. I hope you understand. Can you see that the person who's standing behind this woman, because he's far away, he looks small sized, and in the first picture he looks real size. So just because he's standing far away, we know that he's not a small stature, a small short sized man. His size is real. We know what his size is. But so the size is constant because of our learning that has taken place. So however far distant this man is, or however closer the woman is, we know the man's size is constant. He's not a smaller person because of the difference in the distance. Coming to shape constancy. When we know that the object is a certain shape, we tend to perceive it as the same shape regardless of the viewing angle. We have learned to make corrections in our perception dependent on the angle from which we observe. We'll come to that, the examples of shape and color constancy. Colors of objects tend to remain constant in perception when we know their true color. Visual objects also appear constant in their degree of whiteness, grayness and blackness. So we go into those examples. Shape constancy. Can you see here? See, it's a door. Shape is the same, but you tend to see the way, even though it's looking as if it's opened, it's slightly open and slightly more opened. The way it is shown in different angles, it looks as if the size of the door is bigger, but it's actually the same. The angle makes it look smaller and bigger. Same way, the color also. Sometimes a dark blue color may look very light if you're seeing it from a distance. Just because you're seeing the person who's wearing a blue shirt from far away doesn't mean the shirt is lighter blue. The distance does not, you know it, that it is dark blue, and because it's from a far away place you're looking at, the color may look lighter. And same way, a tree from a distance will look very light and green, but when you go near the tree leaves are dark green. Flowers or anything, the bird, when it's flying very high, the color of the bird may be different than when you see the bird from a closer shot. Then we saw size, we saw color constancy, shape. We're looking at something called depth perception. Ability to view the world in 3 dimensions and to perceive distance is known as depth perception. Nowadays you have TV which are bringing the movies in a 3D dimension that it looks as if it's very real. This ability helps us to perceive 3-dimensional space and to accurately judge distance. So 3-dimensional is done by an ability that our brain has, that is to perceive depth perception. Without that depth perception, can you insert a thread in a needle? You need to have the depth perception that you can easily insert a thread into a needle eye. Look at this example to understand depth perception. Can you see the 3-dimensional picture? The way the picture is drawn, you can see the depth perception, as if the child is on top of a platform and there is a floor, a square floor. So all this is created with the cues that's available. An artist uses certain cues in his artwork so that he can create a depth perception by the angle of the lines and by the colors that he has used, and also the way he has, as I said, the angle and the shapes and the colors. He has used all these cues, and the distance gives the impression of a depth perception. Without depth perception, you cannot ride a bicycle on the road, because you will never know there is a big pothole on the road. Or without depth perception, from first floor down, when you come downstairs, you need to have this depth perception to understand there is a staircase and that you have to keep every step on the stair carefully. And then we talk about perception of movement. When you ride in a moving vehicle and look out the window, or for example, if you are sitting in a train and the objects outside appear to be moving in the opposite direction. Objects very far away, such as the moon and the sun, appear to move in the same direction as the viewer. So this is again the perception of the movement. The trees go past you, and while moon and the sun comes in the same direction as you're traveling, because they are far away, whereas the ones which are closer to you, near the train, appear as if they are moving in the opposite direction. So the distance affects your perception of movement. So perception of movement is movement or motion is perceived by following the progressive change of an object's position in space with time. It has two types. Real movement, the perception of the actual movement of objects in the world, is termed as real motion, movement perception. Apparent movement is movement perceived in the absence of physical movement of an image across the retina. This can be produced by a rapid succession of motionless stimuli that minimize the changes that occur in real movement. There are several types of apparent motion movement. We'll come to that. Can you see? When you see this, there is absolutely no movement, but can you see as if it's moving? Your eyes are seeing as if the circles are moving. Can you make out? And you also can perceive the dots are moving. Can you? This is called the apparent movement. There is no real movement. And this is produced by a rapid succession of motionless stimuli that minimize the changes that occur in real movement. The rapid succession. See, the designs are so close to each other and all similar designs. So you feel as if your eyes are making it believe that it is moving. Can you see the dots moving? Can you see the design moving? This is called apparent movement when there is no movement. So there is no movement, but it appears as if it's moving. Time perception. We perceive time in seconds, minutes and hours, which pass into days, weeks, months and in years and even in centuries. Time is perceived in terms of past, present and future. So perception of time is less in children than in elders. Several factors influence our time perception. It's subjective and objective. Subjective based on our age, activity, motivation and intelligence. Objective. It is objective when we are able to see it as it's happening now, as it's happening tomorrow, or as it has happened already. So, but subjective factors can affect the way we perceive time, as we see that very young children don't have a time concept. Same way, very, very, very elderly people who are at home and doing nothing, or really past 80 and 90, if they have some kind of dementia or forgetfulness, again they also do not perceive. And then activity, when you're engaged in an activity which is a scheduled activity, then you're more conscious of your time. If you're just spending time doing nothing, then you're not again oriented to time. Motivation, depending on your goals and motivation, you're conscious of past, present, because you feel you are goal oriented and time matters to you a lot. And again, your intelligence. People, they say people are very intelligent, are very, very time driven, clock driven, because they are type A personalities who are always conscious of the clock. So again, time perception depends on the subjective factors and objective factors. So this is about perception, and I hope you understand what perception is. Basically, you understand that all that you see, hear, taste and feel are stimuli or a single stimulus from the environment around you. When you're in your house, you're getting a smell from your kitchen. That is your stimulus for your taste. And what happens is, the brain has to take that, sense it, not the taste, it's the smell. Then the brain processes it, organizes the smell stimulus, and then you understand that the smell is a particular food is being cooked. You will say a sambar is cooked in the kitchen. You understand that your mother is making sambar because it takes time. The stimulus is the smell, and then the brain organizes, and then you're able to say, oh, it is the smell of sambar, and that is called perception. Okay? So there is a sensation stage where you smell something from the kitchen, and then your brain processes it with all the kinds of different way we saw how it perceives, size, colors, shape, time, everything. And then distance, and then your brain processes, and then you're interpreting the stimuli or the sensation as sambar, and that is what is called perception. Okay.